In 1951, the American government and the United Kingdom sought to gain control of Iran's nationalized oil industry, known today as the British corporation BP, by orchestrating a coup to install a monarch friendly with Western interests. This eventually invigorated a group of Iranian students holding over 60 hostages captive at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The hostage crisis was finally mitigated after a period of 444 days, immediately following the inaugural address was delivered by the newly elected Republican President Ronald Reagan. How did the newly elected administration result in the end of the Iranian hostage crisis of 1979? And how did foreign relations progress between the U.S. and Middle East following the collapse of the Shah? Veteran CIA analyst Ray McGovern is back with us on WHDT World News to discuss his perspectives from working within numerous presidential administrations, especially his chief role during Reagan's first term of office. Last time he was with us, we discussed Ray's presentation of the Sam Adams Award to Edward Snowden, and today he'll also expound upon the national media's response to Edward Snowden's actions. Welcome back to the program, Ray.
Most welcome.
Ray, in our last interview, we didn't have enough time, and I want to have you back on to discuss your experiences in going on CNN. And we had talked about how you went on CNN, you were discussing the Snowden revelations, but you were cut off. What happened there?
Well, I was reciting the Fourth Amendment. I told Erin Burnett, the moderator, that it was only one sentence, and I'd like to read it to her, and so I did. This is the amendment that says to the right of the people to be secure from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause, supported by a description of the particulars of the place to be searched or the persons or things to be seized.
So CNN cut you off because you were reciting the Constitution.
Right. Then, Gary, I was just about to say, now, there is no way, so now, Mr. McGovern, let's go back to Bob Baer. And then I tried again. I said, and there's no way, now, Mr. McGovern, let's go back. Well, the rest of the sentence, of course, was, and there is no way that what NSA has been doing in this country for decades now can be squared with that Fourth Amendment, unless you argue that all of us, Erin Burnett, Ray McGovern, Gary, the whole lot of us are suspected terrorists, that there is probable cause specified in the Fourth Amendment to brand us that, and then that the particulars of why they consider that and what should be searched or seized should be spelled out in this necessary warrant. Now, look at what's happening. Vacuum cleaner approach to all the data, no probable cause, no particulars of the persons or places to be seized or searched, and no warrant. No, the warrant is, let's collect everything. So you have, and this is the first time in my 50 years in government to watch this, you have the government, you have the so-called congressional overseers over the intelligence community, really the overlookers of the intelligence community. And then you have 10 or 12 co-opted, complicit judges. So you've got all three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches, sort of complicit in this violation, gross violation of the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution, for which the folks where I now live fought very hard to get into that Constitution.
And then, of course, CNN decides that they needed to cut you off. How long was the interview?
Well, it was supposed to be a discussion. And then they said, now we're going to have Bob Baer on. Now, I know Bob. He's one of they pay him, okay? And he's not a bad guy. And he didn't say egregious things, but the first question was entirely predictable. How can you arrogate to yourself the power to release documents that are classified? How can you do that, Well, an enlightened discussion of that would include a discussion of what values are at stake here. The Constitution is a supreme value, in my view, what the ethicists or the moral theologians call a supervening value. When you see violations of a Constitution that you are solemnly sworn to protect, well, then you have to weigh that against a little promise on a piece of paper where they say, where you say that I will not release classified information because it would endanger national security. Well, I would argue that in Ed Snowden's case, not releasing this incredibly intrusive eavesdropping on all Americans would have been a danger to the national security of the United States.
So what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is why exactly did CNN not want you to simply state the founding documents of this nation?
Well, who's CNN's primary commentator on these things? It's General, or former General, Michael Hayden. Now, he was head of NSA. He was the director of NSA.
So is Hayden a paid commentator for CNN?
Yeah.
So then,
that it is.
So there's a conflict of interest there.
Well, hello. Not when they're, not when they're part of this nexus that I've been trying to describe. Now, it was he to whom Dick Cheney went, not after 9/11, okay? Before 9/11, February 2001, and said, look, disregard that commandment over there at Fort Meade, NSA, thou shalt not eavesdrop on Americans without a warrant. Give me a break. That's by the boards. Forget about it. And that's when they set up that operation in Folsom Street in San Francisco. We know all about that. Everything was being sucked out of AT&T and given to NSA against the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. So it started then. And Michael Hayden was the guy that said, yes, sir, I'll do it, even though he was violating his oath to protect the Constitution. One of the former heads of NSA, Bill Odom, said that Hayden should have been court-martialed for following that illegal order. And Bill Odom was a straight guy. He was completely right. Another former NSA.
Well, let me ask you another question here, because a lot of things we've talked about is the NSA, the CIA, and these agencies. When I attended the Christmas party in Washington, D.C. At the National Reconnaissance Office several years ago, when I entered the building through the security checkpoints, there was a big quote on the wall, and it said, "Silence is their only defense." Could you define what that means and why the National Reconnaissance Office would have that on their wall?
Well, the National Reconnaissance Office is the office that runs the satellites, okay? And they have a very good point in saying that if Americans and any other people were aware of the capabilities of these satellites, and they truly are extraordinary, then their value would diminish, okay? So silence, in that case, to keep those secrets completely up and above board, to be honored, okay? Now, silence with respect to abuses of the Constitution on the part of NSA or CIA or Special Forces or the FBI, their silence is not golden. Their silence is cowardice. And all too many people see these abuses and say, well, I've got kids in college, I got a career going. Maybe when I get to be more senior, maybe then if something like this happens, then I'll blow the whistle. So when Edward Snowden, in his cushy job there with Booz Allen Hamilton in Honolulu with a beautiful girlfriend and a six-figure salary, he had it all together. Why did he do this? Well, people can't understand why he did it, but I can. There are a few of us that take that pledge to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States seriously. He saw himself not only in a position to know things that he thought we should know, but he was an accomplice. He was helping them do this stuff. And he said, that's it. I've got to tell Americans, whatever risk comes to me, I'm going to figure out a way to get this message out. He watched what happened to other whistleblowers who tried to go through the system. He said, no way can I get my message out by doing that. He got out of Dodge, ended up in Hong Kong, gave the data to Greenwald and Laura Poitras. Now, this is an interesting thing. That was all arranged. They got the data. Now, they're not social workers, okay? They went home. They're journalists. They went home to write their articles. So there's Ed Snowden all alone in Hong Kong. Guess what? WikiLeaks comes to the rescue. Sarah Harrison arrives. She helps him arrange a ticket via Moscow to Latin America, where he was being offered asylum. And what happens? On the way to Moscow, Secretary Kerry decides to pull his passport to make him stateless. He spends 5 months, I'm sure it's 5 weeks, I'm sure it's felt like months, at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow, where I just was with my 3 colleagues, trying to figure out how to get around or through through Russia. No way could he do it safely. And Vladimir Putin decides, well, I'm obliged in any sense to honor his request for asylum given his circumstances, and I'll do it. And so, ironically, even though Edward Snowden never intended to end up in Russia, he ended up in the only place on the face of this earth where he is reasonably secure from search or seizure, but also from being killed by a drone or being whacked by a SEAL Team 6. Okay, I don't think that even given the gung-ho attitude of our drone flyers and our SEAL Team 6ers, that they're going to try to do that to him in Russia. And so we'll see how this all plays out. But for the nonce, Edward Snowden is in a particularly safe place and able to follow things and actually help Congress in developing.
I want to ask you a question about the trail of data that Snowden revealed.
Sure.
You mentioned he was in Honolulu, and he had a cushy job and a beautiful girlfriend, and in paradise. And then I assume, and maybe you have more insight because you actually met him. Did he simply transfer that data to a jump drive, put it in his pocket, and then hop on a plane to Hong Kong? How did the data actually get extracted? How did it move? And how did the NSA have no clue, given the reality that they're eavesdropping on everything, sweeping up all kinds of data? How did they have no clue what he was doing?
Well, how can they monitor Angela Merkel's cell phone and still keep track of what systems administrators are downloading from their very, 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 very sensitive documents? I mean, it's misfeasance, it's malfeasance, it's complete, it's incomprehensible how few controls the NSA had on this data. And partly it's because, they're out collecting it all. Who cares about what happens to it? So what happened was Ed Snowden famously ended up in Hong Kong with 4 laptops. Now, anybody who knows about how you store data knows that, you can store some stuff on laptops, but that's not, you get a little thumb drive and get as much as you want. And so I'm not going to speculate because I don't know, but talk to technology people and they'll tell you that you can bring a whole lot of stuff out physically or electronically in encrypted form. In any case, he was the supreme technologist, and he knew how to do it, and he did it. And the fact is that he hadn't really thought past Hong Kong. He went to Hong Kong because he couldn't have gone anywhere else without being detected. He's an NSA employee. He was lucky to get out of Honolulu. The pretense was he was going to see a doctor somewhere. So they didn't find him for a couple of days. So that's why he went to Hong Kong. It was not because he was giving stuff to the Chinese. He wasn't. And it's not because he wanted to give stuff to the Russians. He hasn't, okay? It's all a matter of happenstance, serendipity, call it providence, if you will. He's safe now, and he achieved his objective. And once again, he would not have been able to continue to be safe. The Chinese authorities were breathing down his neck when Sarah Harrison arrived from Australia, got him a ticket to Moscow, and then further on to Cuba. You know the rest of the story. The reason that he ended up in Russia has to do with Secretary of State John Kerry, who told Vladimir Putin, look, I know there's no extradition treaty between the United States and Russia, but you must surrender Edward Snowden to us. And I can just see Putin, sitting around saying, who is this guy? Who is this guy telling me what I must do to someone in Sheremetyevo Airport? And so it was a combination, I think, of Putin kind of being just challenged in this ungodly way, and then saying, well, if I take the high road, if I obey international law, which requires me to give asylum to a person like this, a stateless person, because of what Kerry did, I'll do it. And you can be sure, again, that nothing's going to happen to Edward Snowden as long as he's in Russia. He's very well protected because Vladimir Putin is not going to let any SEAL team or any drone operators who work their wares on Edward Snowden.
Now, Ray, we're up against a break, and I want to come back and I want to look at history and discuss with you your firsthand experience with the Iranian hostage crisis, but we do have to take a break. We're talking with former CIA analyst Ray McGovern, 27-year veteran of the CIA, right here on WHDT.